All right, everybody, how are ya? Thanks for checking us out. In this video, I'm going to count down 5 players to trade for in fantasy leagues ahead of week 4, but we're coming out of Thursday Night Football, and we'll just give you the Jordan Howard highlights from that game by way of saying, if ever there was a time to sell Jordan Howard, let's please do it. Over 100 total yards, 3 touchdowns. Not saying he's a bad player, but he's a power player without a lot of wiggle or speed or acceleration. He had some massive holes to run through. He made a couple great holes with power as well. And his receiving touchdown, kind of by himself. This is the time. Find the sheep in your league. Find the numbers lover in your league. Deal Jordan Howard for something great. Okay, let's begin the countdown of players to trade for. At number 5, I have Christian Kirk, who, listen, it's hard for me to guarantee Christian Kirk will definitely rise above the group of, say, top 30 wideouts. There's just a lot of wideouts in the NFL who get a lot of volume. But Christian Kirk sure is one of them. He's tied for 4th in the NFL in targets with Cooper Kupp and Sammy Watkins, with one more than his teammate Larry Fitzgerald, who's currently valued much more highly than Kirk, I think probably because of his name. In fact, Kirk's value, I think, is undercounted right now because he hasn't found the end zone yet. Would have loved to have seen him bring in this long one Sunday against the Panthers, but he's legit fast, he's strong on the ball, and while the whole Kyler Murray can't miss thing was dramatically overrated in August, because if a quarterback plays from behind frequently enough, he will continue to make bad plays sometimes and sink a team, but we are seeing good pace from the Arizona offense. And more importantly, Kirk's upside, I think, is 8 touchdowns still the rest of the way because he himself is a dynamic open field player. The reason to put him on this list is because right now, the fantasy world isn't really even treating him like a top 100 player. And I definitely think his upside gives him much better potential than that. I mean, I'm looking to sell off kind of a spare part. Give someone like Jordan Howard for him. Can't do that right now, but at the end of week 4, maybe you could. Or someone like John Ross, who has touchdowns and therefore better numbers. Or Kenyon Drake, or Malcolm Brown. Kind of a fringy player on your roster. And if that's what you give up for him, then you won't feel obliged to start Kirk right away. Sort of wait a couple of weeks and see if the bust out really might happen. We'll be back in a second, and we'll keep going down my list of players to trade for. If you haven't been sleeping great, or if you've been waking up stiff and sore, might be time for a new mattress. If it is, I personally want to recommend Lisa mattresses to you. I sleep on a Lisa every night. I have for 4 years now. Go someplace else, I just don't sleep as well. And they deliver a mattress direct to your door. Now, I remember before I got mine, I had reservations. You're telling me I get a mattress without ever sitting on it first? But Lisa takes the anxiety away from that. They give you 100 nights to sleep on your new mattress. And if you don't love it, return it after more than 3 months. Get your money back. No questions asked. And I can get you 15% off right now. Go to lisa.com. Use the promo code Harris15. I really think you'll sleep better. And it's absolutely risk-free. Lisa.com. Use that promo code Harris15. Okay, back at the list, and if you listen to my podcast, I do a podcast, by the way, every weekday, all season long. Find it at harrisfootball.com. So I did this players to trade for list last Friday on the show. So you're probably not going to be shocked to find Joe Mixon next in this list. Now, it was a better call last week. It was. I hope you listened to the pod. I hope you already bought. Against the Bills last week, Mixon had 17 touches for 95 yards and a touchdown, and now the panic has abated. Now suddenly people seem to believe he's kind of good at football again. But the fact is, everything I've touted to you the last 2 years about Mixon still applies. And people exaggerate the horror of a lot of NFL situations. I agree the Bengals probably aren't great. They aren't very good, really. But they run plays, they sure do, and they know where their offensive bread is buttered. That game last week was a microcosm of what I think Mixon's season will be. He had some stuffage early, for sure, but the Bengals kept at it with him. Eventually, the dam burst. He actually got tackled down at the 1, which was kind of a bummer. It looked like he'd be denied the score, but then Andy Dalton did him the rock-solid favor by running a little simple rollout screen for his touchdown. And the larger point is, Mixon is a good, bordering on great runner who explodes into and out of cuts and has vision and power. So despite us missing the bottom of his value last week, I can still see a purchase here. You're going to have to pay a fairer price, but if you really need a running back and you have enough receiver depth to afford to pay with a good receiver, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin. I mean, it'll hurt a little, but I think those are wins for you in that sort of deal for Mixon. Or, the preference is always to trade ponies for a horse. So maybe you can get away with a combo of, let's say, Sony Michel and Darren Waller. Some combo like that. Okay, so I already gave you a wide receiver 3 type who I hope has a chance to ascend beyond that. I'll give you a wide receiver 1 type for whom you will have to pay. But I think the market is underestimating him just a bit. Michael Thomas, even with Drew Brees out probably at least another month, I still view Thomas as a top 10 overall player for the rest of the year, and my guess is you don't have to pay quite that for him. I'll admit the goal line touchdown last week in Seattle saved what was a pedestrian day otherwise, and Teddy Bridgewater really didn't have that much to do with the Saints getting and keeping a lead in week 3. But Thomas's game fits a wide variety of quarterbacks. You'd rather have Brees, but he's physical, he's got amazing hands, he gets open. I think Bridgewater can keep him afloat, or maybe vice versa. And then the thing to remember is that Brees comes back probably another month. Maybe something like week 9, maybe week 10, just in time for a big playoff push. There's risk with Thomas, but he's a good enough player that I think the reward is worth that risk. Sort of wish he hadn't scored a touchdown last week in the context of trying to trade for him, because 5 for 54 sounds worse than 5 for 54 with a touchdown. But for instance, I trust Thomas even with Bridgewater, I don't know, more than I do James Conner in his current situation. It's weird to me. Conner is being valued basically where he was before the quarterback there got hurt, and Thomas has slid 10 to 15 spots. That's a swap that I'm pretty sure I'd make in a heartbeat. Listen, running back, clearly a scarcer position than wide receiver, and therefore that kind of move, trading for an elite receiver, only being valued a notch below elite, that's not for every fantasy team. I still think that would prove to be a pretty good move. At number 2 on my list, a favorite of mine, the Wizinator, Kerryon Johnson. So again, I mentioned that last week I did this list prior to week 3 on the podcast, which is a good reason to be listening to the podcast, and I had Mark Ingram as one of my best buys. Unfortunately, that window is probably now closed after a 3-touchdown game, and Johnson himself is coming off a touchdown against the Eagles, but you can still point to a low yardage total, just 43 scrimmage yards on 21 touches against a very good Eagles run defense. And hopefully maybe that helps you coerce a bit of panic from the Johnson owner in your league who feels like he or she maybe got away with something in the Eagles game. The most important thing I always want to stress first is the player himself is verifiably good, an accelerating, quick twitch athlete without huge thump. Certainly he plays very physically. If I have a concern about his style, it's that he might be too physical, maybe subject to injury, but the stuff I liked about him this summer still applies, and no CJ Anderson, and the rookie Ty Johnson didn't cut into his workload much in week 3. And if you trade for him now, I mean, you get potentially a tasty track meet looking week 4 matchup against the Chiefs. Let me re-emphasize again that your best move, if you can get away with it while trading, is ponies for a horse. You've done a great job working the waiver wire and picking up people who've performed well, but maybe you have a lot of similar seeming options that just lead to pulling out your hair, not knowing which one to start in any given week. Trade 2 of those players for someone like Kerryon Johnson. I mean, I would love to tell you again, Jordan, 3 touchdowns, Howard, and maybe put together with many of the wide receiver 3s you have on your bench who just broke out a little bit, Marvin Jones. Jordan Howard, Marvin Jones would be great, but you can't trade Jordan Howard leading into week 4. Maybe James White and DK Metcalf. Put together a combo, ponies for a horse. Lastly, my number 1 spot. I know we Stefon Diggs owners are panicked. I know it looks bad. Frankly, this week against the Bears could be rough. But Diggs is the number 1 buy low in fantasy football right now. This is the way we play the game right. Where others look at numbers and see panic, we make sure the player is still okay. And Diggs is more than okay. This has been weird circumstance. There's been a statistical gulf between Adam Thielen and Diggs, But people were saying that in the first half of last year too, and then Diggs went bananas. I love Thielen. I'm not downgrading him. He's a really good player. But Diggs is great as well, and this has been about weird game flow and bad luck. A phantom offensive interference call against the Packers that disallowed this touchdown. And it's just been Thielen who's been fortunate enough to make a few plays at the beginnings of blowouts. And I know it's been frustrating to have Diggs to this point, but now, those of us who don't have him, we should be taking advantage of that frustration. That's what buying low means, taking on someone else's distressed asset, being willing to take over the risk that maybe it stays bad, but having the conviction that it'll probably turn around because the dude himself is a baller. An example I gave on this Friday's podcast is let's trade Matt Ryan and DJ Chark, like an up-and-coming, but probably flash-in-the-pan kind of receiver. Put them together, get Stefon Diggs. You see what I mean? Deal from a position of strength. Pick excess from your roster, guys you could start and who could start on other teams, but you don't necessarily have to, and get the guy whose ADP, when we're talking about Diggs, was third round a month ago. That would be arbitrage. That would be smart. But what do you think? What trade questions do you have for us? We can give you more names if you make a habit of listening to the podcast every weekday, but we can also answer some questions. So leave us some trade questions down in the comments, and we're going to answer a few of them in the next day or two. And thank you very much for watching. Thanks so much for watching. Please, please, please smash that like button, write a comment, tell us who else you'd like to see us review film on, and of course, best of all, please subscribe to our channel and then click that little bell above the subscribe button and you'll be notified whenever we post a new video.